With the investigation into the deadly Air India crash still underway, a report has now claimed that the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau is preparing to release an interim report which will look into the findings of the probe. The AAIB, the agency overseeing this probe, is working to release the interim report on the Air India crash incident soon, but is unlikely to be published in the month of June, around the anniversary of one of the world's deadliest aviation accidents in recent times. Air India flight AI171 crashed shortly after taking off from the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport in Gujarat, in Ahmedabad, on the 12th of June 2025. The flight was headed for London's Gatwick Airport. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner crashed 32 seconds after taking off and crashed into a student hostel of Byramjee Jeejeebhoy Medical College. Of the 12 crew and 230 passengers, only one passenger survived the plane crash. On the ground, around 19 people were killed and nearly 70 were injured due to the crash. We have Captain Sanjay Karve, aviation expert and former accountable manager, aviation, Government of Maharashtra, now joining us on the broadcast. Captain Sanjay Karve, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us here on News 9. Tell us, on this tragic anniversary too, we will not see a probe report come out, but we're now hoping that on this anniversary that there can be a probe report, an interim report even, that comes out soon that can tell us the cause of the crash.
Good afternoon to you and all the viewers. 12th of June is just about a fortnight away from now. And AIB is mandated as per the ICAO regulations to have actually a full-fledged report within a year.
Yeah.
But considering the gravity of the accident and the larger implications, I wouldn't be surprised if the AIB releases an interim report to meet the regulatory requirements, since India is a signatory to the UN Charter and the ICAO. One has to take into consideration that this is not a straightforward accident. It has got too many implications. 787 today is a backbone of a lot of airlines across the world, and they occupy about 20 to 30% of the airspace in the world today flying. Any finger which is pointed towards Boeing or the engine manufacturer has to have a solid grounding which cannot be disputed or refuted. And as you are aware, an accident of such magnitude, if you just recollect a few days ago, a French court has asked Air France and Airbus to pay damages in tunes of millions of euros to the passengers because they have found that Air France and Airbus was responsible for the fault where the pitot tube had got frozen. Now, AIB obviously would be keeping that also in mind, because should something like that emerge, it would become a very major issue, not only for India, but for the US and other agencies which were involved in manufacturing the aircraft. Yes, we also have on record that there have been instances where incidents of this nature have taken place, including an Air India flight, a 787, which had that switch going to off. But if you recollect, the DGCA team is already in the US, where Boeing has said that there is no fault with the switch on the test bench. And DGCA sent its team to verify that yes, there was indeed no fault. Now, the fact remains that the crew of that particular flight had reported before takeoff that the switch from run had gone to off and they had to reselect it to run. And this was not found out on the test bench. The basic problem has been created by the initial interim report,
Right,
which the AIB released, which said that one of the pilots has been heard saying that, did you switch it off? This, to common sense or any normal average thinking person, it would mean that the crew was at fault.
yeah.
And that is why, if you remember, there's a hue and cry. FIP has gone to the court. FIP has approached the government saying that this is short of accusing the crew.
And now too, as we're having this conversation, all we can expect is another interim report that is said to be in the making and not the final report.
Absolutely. Because they will have to take into consideration all these facts. And let us be very honest, Boeing is not going to take it lying down. If the AIB says that Boeing was at fault or there was a manufacturing fault, Boeing is not going to take it lying down. Forget Boeing, even the United States of America, the parent company or the parent state, is not going to take it lying down. No nation would like to be told that, look, a company operating under your mandate, under your regulatory framework, has shoddy work culture and which has resulted in deaths of so many people. This is notwithstanding the fact that there are plenty of Boeing workers who worked on 787 who have gone on record saying that the aircraft which were being sent outside the US,
Right.
the quality of manufacturing was much lower than for the aircraft which are operating within the United
So
States. They
all
have
this
gone on
means,
record.
Captain Karve, which means that all of this means that you will end up making a scapegoat of the pilots one way or the other. If not, what else could be the reason?
That is a very scary thought,
Yes.
because a pilot who is dead, he cannot defend himself. Let us be very honest. In that Hudson River case, if no one would have survived, Captain Sully would have been solely blamed for the entire accident. It was fortunate for the entire aviation fraternity that everyone survived and Captain Sully was there to defend himself. In this particular case, we really don't know what transpired unless and until AIB, makes that entire voice or entire CVR right from the time they started up the aircraft till the time they crashed public, which to my mind is unlikely to happen. In fact, I just read a few days ago in one of the crashes in US, the NTSB has barred the voice recording to be made public. So I wouldn't be surprised if AIB also quotes that as a precedence and says, look, this is too sensitive. And the logic NTSB gave was, this is too sensitive for the family of the crew. So we would not like to make it public. So the only apprehension here is either they will come out with saying that mishandling of controls instead of putting the entire blame on the crew, they might say training error or they were not sufficiently trained on this particular aspect or things like that. But if they totally blame the crew, that is going to be very sad and unfortunate because as of now, we do not have anything on record which shows that the crew was at fault. Now, one of the American channels had specified that the captain of the aircraft was mentally not in a state to fly. We are in a different culture. In India, when you lose your parent, you're obviously not going to be in a mentally stable state, at least for a couple of years, unlike the US or North American culture, where you meet your family only on Thanksgiving Day or Mother's Day and Father's Day. For them to understand the Indian family structure, it is next to impossible. In India, everyone would understand if you lose a member of your family, a part of you is taken away. That doesn't mean that you are unfit to carry out your duties or unfit to function. But this is what the Western media is harping on, that he was affected by a death in the family, which to my mind is extremely ridiculous. Most of our medicals are carried out by Air Force establishments and prominent hospitals in the country. The moment you say that he was medically unfit, we are indirectly saying that the medical standards which we are using are all false. And if the Air Force is using false medical standards, then there's cause for worry for the Air Force pilots also. So let us see what the AIB has got to say. In fact, I really sympathize with the AIB because they not only have to look at these factors, they also have to look at the relationships with FAA, ICAO, and other contracting neighbors because the United States is not going to take it lying down if the AIB purely blames the Boeing.
Okay, it will be, you're saying that very, very unlikely that it will be Boeing and it will be an engine-related issue. But, the fact that this is going to take us even more time and still there's no clarity on when there'll be a final report in itself is great injustice to all those 241 lives lost in that tragic crash?
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. But unfortunately, that is how things work. Like that Air France accident from Rio to Paris. It has taken 18 years finally to come out with a court ruling, in which they have blamed Air France and Airbus. And I won't be surprised if Air France or Airbus appeal against that hearing in the French court again.
Right. If it's going to take that much time, then, for that Air France, and we don't really know how much time this is going to take, but this is certainly a wake-up call, sir, for Indian aviation. Has to be, isn't it? In the recent past, with the rise of civil aviation, as well as there's been great awareness of the rise of the risks associated with civil aviation, and then the tragic Ahmedabad air crash has been a wake-up call in terms of specifically aircraft maintenance and procedures.
Not only aircraft maintenance and procedures, let us not put the entire onus on the aviation industry. We also have to look at the urban development aspect. The cities are growing so rampantly in and around an airport. If you pick up any newspaper in a city which has an airport coming up, the prominent headline in that newspaper is for a housing project. 2 minutes from the airport. Watch an aircraft taking off and landing from your balcony. What indirectly it implies is you have construction coming up within the safety zone of the airport.
Right.
Who is allowing them? This is the government of that particular area. So it is not only an aviation fault, it is the fault of the entire system. When you design an airport, you have to design it in such a way where you say, okay, 2 kilometers around it or 1 kilometer around it has to be a sterile zone, which unlikely to happen given the commercial needs and the commercial exploitation of the area around it. You look at Mumbai, try and come into landing. It's a very scary sight on an approach on runway 27 at Mumbai. You are flying so close to those hills and those houses all around you. One odd aircraft, God forbid, has a single engine also. I really don't know what is going to happen. And this construction is just continuing. There's no stoppage. We are just moving vertically upwards and under the name of progress. So urban development also needs to take into consideration all these factors. Safety is not only aviation responsibility. Safety or air safety is everyone's responsibility.